All right, welcome back to Noob School. I've got my good friend and sometimes sidekick, Marty Osborn. Hey, Marty Osborn here. Marty has just put out this wonderful book, Finding Significance, and we're going to talk about the book today and maybe a few other things.
Sure.
All right, so you just had a kickoff book signing party. Was it last night?
Yeah, it was Monday night,
Monday
2
night.
nights ago, yeah.
Monday night. I was there. It was very cool. You had a great turnout.
Yeah, it was fun. One thing I found is I remember things people say, like little things that people say. And I remember when I was talking to you and I said, any advice like on the book and so forth? And you remember you're like, yeah, you should do a book launch, but you should really plan for it.
Yeah. Which you did.
Which I did,
yeah.
Which I took it to heart. And
yeah.
we had a great time. Table 301 catered. We had Brooke Dixon playing, amazing guitarist. If anybody's ever looking for a guitarist, he was great. And Andre Suttle did photography and did some interviews, and just a really great night.
That's great. So tell people, the book's called Finding Significance. Tell people about the book.
Yeah, so it's always interesting, I think, when you write a book, like, a lot of it is that we all have something to say, something we want to get out of us. And for me, over the years, I just got really frustrated with bad leaders, like bad leaders, bad behavior. And I saw it over and over again. And it just kind of like pissed me off I always said that I got tired of working for assholes. And I built a company at Voco, and I built a company that I wanted to work for. And that was sort of the genesis of it, is that how can you build a company, be a leader, be a nice person, and still win? And so that was sort of what was in my gut, what I had to get it out, and kind of started going on to it. And then, it's funny how life sort of takes over, the flow of life. And that was my rallying cry. And I would go to meetings and I would tell people the book title, and everybody would laugh and they'd go, I know exactly, great title. But I was talking to my wife as we got closer to release. And my wife's funny because she'll usually say her piece and then just drop it. Like kind of say her piece and be done. She didn't drop this. She's like, you can't use this title.
What was the title? What was the first title?
You don't have to be an asshole to be a leader.
Okay. Okay.
And everybody's like, great title. I still have people saying you shouldn't have changed it.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't let it go. And her point was, she said, that's just not who you are. And she kept saying it's a bad word. And she said, if somebody's going to Google asshole, your picture's going to come up. And she goes, is that the person you want to be? And in my gut, I knew that quite wasn't there. And then I had a beta reader of mine, and he was reading the book and he really liked it. And he said, want to give this to my boss, but I like her. If I give her the book, am I calling her an asshole? And I went, that's it. Like, I had to change it. And so when I really dug back into it, it was really, when it was all said and done, what I was writing was how I was finding significance in my life, my why. And what I really wanted to do was share my story about leadership and my feeling. And I don't know, sometimes just things come out of you, but that word significance meant something to me, because each and every one of us, whatever we do, are trying to find significance in our life. And that's what this was me in my search for significance, leadership, and to prove that it could be done the right way.
I was always curious, because I know when you started at Voco, you had two partners, right? And both of those partners live in California?
That's correct, yep.
I always wondered about that. We never really talked about it, but I would have thought that would be hard, just to have two partners would be hard, and then have those two partners be in California.
Yeah.
And then for you to have this Marty vision of leadership, which is probably different than what they had.
Yeah.
How did that work? How did you make that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, there's more to that story.
Okay.
There was actually another leader. So there was four. There was four of us. There was one gentleman who was leading it that owned half the company, a young guy who actually kind of, as I set out to start my first company, when I walked out the door, I said it was my Jerry Maguire moment. Like, I had enough of it. I packed my plan up and I walked out the door and I wrote my manifesto. We were going to love our customers. we were going to do it. And the name of my company was going to be Extreme for X Data Stream.
Okay. Nice.
And Advoco at the time was going to be a client of mine.
Okay.
And the closer we got, people were going to leave with me, didn't come. I was by myself. And so the guys at Advoco said, kind of like Jerry Maguire, come on, let's go. And I took my plant and my manifesto, and everybody's like, yeah, it's too risky.
Yeah.
So
my wife said no.
Yeah. And so I joined, and the one was Ken, and he turned out to be an asshole. And I was like, dang, I did it again. So when we first started, it was just constant, this battle, and I think, lying. And so I went and I quit. And my other partner's like, you can't quit. And so at some point in time, finally, Ken decided this wasn't what he wanted to do. And so he left. And our first meeting with the other two partners was called the Meeting of Peace and Tranquility. And Paul and Steve are the best guys, both Brits, both California, but they were like brothers. And what happens is, I think leadership is a lonely business. Entrepreneurship is lonely. And to actually have two partners that you can share with, you can learn from, actually is a really great combination. And what was great is they let me be me. Like, they knew who Marty was. And in my case, like Steve, I was like the disc profile. I talk about testing in the book, about like having a disc profile, like a high I, which is very social. D is quick response. S is more team player. But like C is cautious or detail. Well, I have very little of it. I misspell words. My PowerPoint's wrong. But like Steve is high. And so we really complemented each other. And I joke about it in the book, where I would write proposals and they'd be terrible. And I would send it to Steve, and I would go, Steve, can you just like look at it? Just I need to check my grammar. And he's like, I know what you're doing to me. And the minute he looked at it, he'd just rewrite it. It would be perfect. He would call it the spit and polish. And it just was the right team. And so with partners are the right team, that's what makes it magical. And so those guys were the best.
And in terms of your leadership style, and what you talk about in the book, were they just they turned it over to you because you had the big team here in Greenville, right?
Yeah, so we had the big team in Greenville. One of the things we did, I think, was sort of the best thing, was every Friday we would have a partners call, and it was the three of us talking about the business, what was going on. I think sometimes when you think about a stool, and I talk about even like Dabo in the book around a three-legged stool and how it changed Clemson football. When you look at partnerships, there were three of us, but we were the perfect stool. I was sales and marketing, so I was kind of the front person out in front of the customer. Steve was the op guy. He was the guy that delivered what I sold. And then Paul was the finance, accounting, HR. So we each had very defined roles, and it just worked perfectly.
Perfect. Okay, so you represented different things. That's good. And the guy who left, what was his specialty?
Okay. He was an asshole.
All right.
No, Ken was a tough guy. He sort of set the vision, but he just wasn't patient, and it was really hard.
And when you joined the company, how many people were in it?
There was three.
Three
of us.
Like literally just the three of you?
Just the three of us.
Wow. And so was the intention okay, we're going to grow it, we're going to add, because, you did exactly what you thought you were going to do?
Yeah, again, I think every company, every leadership, and it's kind of back to significance. I think it's back to who we are and what we want. I knew at DataStream, when we worked together, we built one of the greatest products and one of the greatest tools to help companies. But people were always complaining because we'd go to implement it, and they'd tell me like, well, it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. And I'm like, yes, it does. It does all those things. Yeah. And so to me at the time was never this vision to build a company, to sell a company. It was, I saw a problem in the market that customers needed help, right? 60% of all implementations fail, and people struggle. And what they needed was somebody to care, to help them, and to love them.
Yeah.
And so that was really the ultimate goal. That's how we started Advoco, was that mission to really help customers win at the game of maintenance
Yeah.
and build on the stuff that I think DataStream started on.
And you eventually got it up to around 100 people?
We were almost 140.
140 people before you sold it.
Yeah.
So from 3 to, that's pretty strong, man. That's pretty strong. So tell us about the cover. This is the statue of David, I believe.
Yes.
Tell us why you chose that instead of your smiling face.
Well, it's funny is you work through this book all the time, and the cover, it's really important part of the book. And so I was getting ready. The book was getting done. Everything was done. I didn't have a cover. And everybody's saying the most important part of the book is the cover. And I was like, crap. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And so we were going back and forth. And this summer, we went with our family to Italy, to Florence, Italy. Mm-hmm. And we were out in the square. And if you've ever been in the square in Florence, they have the big statue of David. He's out with another statue, and everybody's looking at it. And I was like, this is boring. Mm-hmm. Like, no interest in it. Didn't care. Why do people care about statues? And then my son said, him and his fiance were going to go tour the David tomorrow. She wanted to go see it. Do I want to go with her? And I said, or go with them. And I said, sure. And so we bought a ticket. We get in, you get those little earphones, you know, and you get the translator, and the guy tells a story. And we're standing back, and he starts telling the story of David and Michelangelo. Like, I'm absolutely blown away. Like, Michelangelo, you know, like, he was raised, like, his mom had an accident, and she couldn't lactate, so she couldn't feed him. So she actually gave him to another family to raise. And turns out they were stone cutters. That's how we learned the art of and the joy of stone cutting. Yeah. And they had this piece of stone that people were trying to carve to put on the doma. And they said it was a bad piece of rock, couldn't be done. And at 24, David looked at it and said it was, Michelangelo looked at it and said it was the perfect stone.
Whoa.
And he literally carved the David out of this stone at 24 years old. Wow. And so we're standing, he's telling me his story. Now I'm like, I'm blown away. And the guy says, look at his eyes. Like, if you take the book and you look at those eyes, like you look at his eyes, he said, stand back. And as you walk around, you're going to see different looks. And when you look at him, here's a boy about ready to fight a giant. Like, it's leadership, right? We're going into battle. We're fighting the big giant. And on one side, the look is this look of a child, like timid. There's also this look of, you know, just determination, and then a look of, okay, strategy. How am I going to take this guy down? And that's leadership, right? As leaders, we have to wear many faces. We have to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. We have to be strong at the same time, and we have to be tactical. And so when I thought about that and I stood there and watched it, I said, what else could be on the book? Mm-hmm. Whether David's been used or not, it has to go on my book, because I think I think those are the eyes of a leader.
Nice. Okay. That's cool.
I share one other thing is the other part about the book, you always have to have a subtitle. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because in the subtitle, I was always looking at, like, how do you, like, 5 keys to be the leader of people. And I always thought about follow. And I hate that word follow. Hate it. Like, you know, on LinkedIn, they want you to follow. Yeah. I won't hit it. I'll send a note and say, I'll connect with you. I won't follow you. Okay. Hate it. And so I got a chance to interview Lee Cockrell, who was the head of Disney at the end. Mm-hmm. But early on in his career, he worked for Hilton and Marriott. And by his own admission, he was a big asshole. Yeah. Like, he was getting all the awards. He was doing all the right things, but he was a jerk. Yeah. And in one case, he had a bottle, literally an employee threw a bottle and hit him in the head. Because he took the side of a customer who was wrong and not defended him. He then one time was with Marriott, went to one of his properties in Omaha, and he got there. The guy he was visiting was in the hospital. And he's like, what happened? The guy had such anxiety that this guy was showing up. His nickname was the Doberman. And had such anxiety, fell off a chair, hit his head, put himself in the hospital. And finally, Lee is like, is this the person I want to be? Mm-hmm. And he didn't. And so through coaching, therapy, all kinds of stuff, he changed who he was. Yeah. And I said, what's the one advice that you could give me? And Lee said, Marty, it's simple. how do you become the leader people are happy to see? And I was like, God, that's it.
Yeah.
Like happy's the word.
Yeah.
I mean, John, every time I see you, I'm happy to see you, right? Can we be the salesperson, back to noob school? How can we be the salesperson people are happy to see? If you're always in there trying to get the order, if you're just a taker, not a giver,
right,
then be like, get out.
Yeah.
But the great salespeople, people want to. So that's kind of sorry to jump in, but that's to me the nuisance or the essence of the cover is then 5 keys to becoming the leader people are happy to see.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. Well, how did you get to meet the head of Disney?
That's a great, yeah. By the way, I'm a big. I'm going to throw a book out. I think I may have said this to you, but I had a coach. Through Accenture, they had given me a coach, and sort of towards the end of my coaching sessions, she says, you need to read this book, and it's called The Surrender Project by Michael Singer.
Okay.
And he's a yoga guy, spiritual guy, and really it's just about allowing the flow of life to happen and not prejudge things, and it's just like kind of changed the way I thought about it. So I got fortunate. I got to go to a writing class with Donald Miller. So if anybody doesn't know Donald Miller, he wrote the book Story Brand, top 5 books of all time. Everybody, needs to read Donald Miller. And so I got a chance to go to his house to do a writing class with 20 people, like a dream come true. And so we were going around the room and everybody's saying their title of their books, comes to me. And I said, the title of my book is You Don't Have to Be an Asshole to Be a Leader. And he kind of smirks and laughs and goes, it's a title, it's something people need to know. He goes, have you ever heard of Lee Cockrell? And then Don was good at it because he would lay a breadcrumb. I said, no, I hadn't heard of him. He goes, you should. And that was it, dropped it. So me, like I do, I go home that night and I listen to a podcast. I look at his book. I go to his website. I read half his book that night to learn all about this guy who's incredible. And the next day I go back, Don, you're right. Lee Cockrell's amazing. He goes, if you want, I'll set up an interview with him. And so literally he sent an email to his assistant and said, I'd like you to meet Marty Osborn. He's writing a book about assholes. And Don has a great story on it. Yeah. And I met Don. His wife was driving. He was in Orlando and he's riding with his wife, in the front seat and just had a delightful, just a super nice guy, but just stuff things you look back on, like just, Marty, how do you become the leader people are happy to see?
So how many years had it been since he had converted when you talked to him?
It's a while. So, I mean, if you look at Lee and if you look him up, he wrote a book called Creating Magic. I mean, he was over 40,000 people at Disney creating, the happiest place on earth. Here is a guy nicknamed the Doberman. A bottle hits him in the head, yet now he's leading the happiest place on earth. And so one of the premises and parts of the book is, and this is an interesting question, I think, John, that you answered, the question we ask is, can a leader change? Can an asshole change? Yeah. And there's mixed reviews, but when I did a survey on it, I found about 50% say yes, the other half say no. Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons why we think people can change. There's other reasons why people think they can't. And so in the book, I cover 2 people. I cover Lee Cockrell and his transformation to success, like reaching his true potential. And another gentleman I did writing with is a person named Tucker Max. And some people may, if you recognize him, he was a college phenom writer, wrote a book called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, and became a movie and all kinds of stuff. But really, this guy was an asshole too. And he admitted, his book even says, I'm an asshole. And he changed to be one of the most insightful guys I've ever met. And so he really changed the way I viewed writing and those things. And so both of those are in the book.
And Tucker, he was in the class with you?
Tucker actually taught the class. So my first venture into the book was Scribe. And he basically believed everybody has a story to tell. So he started a company called Scribe. And it was a self-guided author program. And he would teach the first 2 days of the class. So Yeah.
Okay, I got you. And now he's like married, children, and kind of gone completely like traditional.
Traditional, yeah. He helps people write memoirs, and memoirs are tough because you have to get like deep inner truths, and a lot of stuff comes out of you.
Can't just sugarcoat it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, another thing that I found quite humorous is I read half the book so far. As you got really big, as you were trying to become a better leader, and let your people run whatever they're supposed to be doing, you would back off, right? You would back off and let them do it, and you would you do these 360 reviews where they would review you, and all the people would say, oh, let me tell you what I think about Marty, which is very brave of you, by the way. And one of them said, the comment was so funny. It's in the book. It said, Marty, keep not doing anything. It's working.
Keep doing less. It's working.
During those times, I would see you, and you'd be like walking or something. I said, what are you up to? You go, not much. I got hardly anything to do. I'm trying to turn everything over to whatever. And before that, when I saw you, you'd be like, I got to fly to whatever. We got a big demo, and I've got to be there. I remember you saying, if I don't go, then, they want the owner there.
Yeah.
Which I understand.
Yeah.
I understand both sides.
Well, there's an interesting saying is the teacher reveals themselves when the student's ready to learn. Mm-hmm. And I remember a conversation we had 35 years ago. And I think in my previous company, you may have even said, like, Marty, you've got to back off. Like, you cannot do everything. Like, that's the secret. And I was like, yeah, John, good stuff, And I had that told to me many times, and I talk about in the book too, is I met with Scott Millwood. Mm-hmm. Scott came out of DataStream. He was running a similar service company, and he was so great because I could go to him and ask him a million questions. I'd ask him, like, what furniture? What about leases? What about this stuff I didn't know about? And Scott was gracious, and one day I just kept asking him questions, and he finally just sort of stopped and said, you know what your problem is? And I said, what? He goes, you. I'm like, how am I the problem? I'm the answer guy. And he goes, you got to stop. You got to let your team solve. As a leader, you're not the hero of the story.
Right.
You need to guide your people. And I was like, right? Because as leaders, we want to be the hero. We want to be the answer person and everything else.
It's fun.
It's fun. The ego just gets excited about it. But in the end, you have to let your team, if you're going to grow as a leader and grow your company, you have to back off. Yeah. And so I tell the other thing is, so when I took that to heart, I literally would go in, shut my door in the office, and I would sit for like 8 hours doing nothing, like twiddling my thumbs. And I wanted to pick that phone up, and I wanted to jump in that meeting. And I said, don't do it. Yeah. Don't do it, because your team wants to prove that they can do it. And when they did, our numbers took off. Mm-hmm. And you want to do that and let your people. And so, they were like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. That's so interesting because I think, most entrepreneurs like the action. They want to go close deals and make big things happen. And so if you were going to be the leader that's in this book, your responsibilities, I would think, would be more about the vision of the company. Mm-hmm. Perhaps something to do with hiring?
Well, I think as leaders, it depends on what you need at the time, and leadership, it evolves. There's a famous saying, you hear it all the time, and I chuckle when people say it, but you got to work on the business, not in the business. Yeah. And that's important to do. I think if you go back, and really a part of the genesis of the book was what I defined as leadership brand. And what is it? Remember Jeff Bezos, he came out and he made a statement that said, brand is what people say about it when you're not in the room. Mm-hmm. And that kind of hit me, like leadership brand, like what do people say about me when I'm not in the room? Mm-hmm. And I kind of thought a lot about that, like that's important. And I'll ask leaders this question, and some people will say, well, I don't give a shit. Well, that's a brand. Yeah. And to me, one of the things that starts leadership off is, what are the words that you want said about you? Mm-hmm. And so the hardest thing is to sit down, again, I talk about in the book, is to sit down and say, what are the 5 words that you would like said about you when you're not in the room? Mm-hmm. And you write those down, and then I ask the question, what is it that you think they say? Right? And I think back to what you just said is, if you really have guts, and I think the hardest thing as a leader is to be vulnerable to do it, but ask your team, what is it that I should be doing more of? And what should I be doing less of? Like, what is my brand? Mm-hmm. And your team, we're scared about it because it's a hit to our ego. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's really, as a leader, shows you're vulnerable. It's a gift to them that just says they get to weigh in on who they want their leader to be. And I got some incredible feedback. I mean, I got stuff that just said, slow down. You're going too fast. Mm-hmm. I read and read and read, and I bring all these ideas, and they're like, stop. Mm-hmm. So it was just incredible feedback.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I've never done one of those. The last time I got a review was when I wasn't looking. The salespeople put a sign up on my door that said Captain Hazelwood, the captain of the Exxon Valdez. So I'm not sure I had the same grades you got, Marty, but
John,
maybe they loved me.
John, here's what I would say. We'll get the Noob School people to send words into Noob School how you would describe John. And here's how you do it. And it's actually funny because this is a great story. So I heard this idea, and I can't remember, Patrick Lencioni, John Maxwell said it, is send an email out and say, what's one thing I should be doing more of, one thing I should be doing less of.
Yeah.
Thought it was great. So I did it. I got a feedback. So I got my leadership team to do it. Well, one guy just opened up, just dumped on one other guy, wrote paragraphs of it, why I don't like about you. And the other guy was like, if he was in the room, I'd punch him out. And I was like, oh, dear God, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I open up? And it was just funny. But at some point in time, there was this tension between them. And when we really got to the bottom of it, one of my guys, he was an inventor. He was a creative guy, and he was throwing ideas out. The other guy was a doer. He was a tenacity. And so he kept trying to figure out what this other guy wanted, and they were butting heads. And instead of butting heads, we sat down and talked about it. What we realized was they were the perfect match. And when we talked through what made him mad and what he was trying to do, they understood that. And actually turned out to be one of the best things. But, send it out of 360s. it could get a little interesting.
Well, one of the stories that I remember, not just from the book, but from just watching you operate, was we used to all go on President's Club. All the salespeople and managers that hit their number for the year, we get to go to Key West or go skiing or whatever it is we were doing. And it was a great boondoggle, for all the salespeople. And what you realized as a leader, you probably always thought this, was, that the salespeople aren't the only ones who help, the business do well. Mm-hmm. People write the product, people support the product, all those things. And so I'll tell the beginning of it. You can tell the rest of the story. But you decided with your partners that everyone could go to President's Club, even the interns, the receptionists, everyone and their partner, as long as the company hit a certain target collectively. Is that right?
That is correct.
So tell us how that went over.
Well, again, as you said,
nobody believed it. I'm probably the first year. They're like,
Well, it was funny. We were, we used to be in my partner. We'd have these ideas. We'd have these sessions, and I kind of blurred out one thing. We used to have epic Christmas parties, just epic blowouts. Usually, we never got asked back to the same restaurant, but we had to do something different. We were trying to figure out how to grow, and we always talk about the have President's Club. And I have to admit, I went on one out of 7 years, so. I thought it was unfair. Here I was, this great Marty Osborn. No, I just always thought about that, how do we reward everything as a team? How do we not just service certain people, but everyone? And so we came up with this idea that just said, if we grow 20%, we shut the office down, we take the whole office to the Caribbean. We take interns, we take spouses, significant others, everybody, 4 days in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. And you should have seen, we announced this, people were excited. And we had people, just humping it. And I remember talking to one of the guys' wives, and I was like, sorry, Josh has, been really, busy. He's been on the road. She goes, I don't care. We're going to the Caribbean.
Nice.
And so what happened was we had this collective thing. And every year we just blew through our numbers.
Yeah.
Like just, and everybody like, where are we going? Where are we
Yeah.
going this year? Where are we
Yeah.
going next year? If I had pictures, like we had foam parties and the whole company in the pool dancing, like,
Yeah.
and it was just such a great bonding moment. And people would hear about this. And when we were up for South Carolina Business of the Year Award, and the first year we applied, and we only did it 2 years, won it 2 years. The guy's like reading down the stuff we do, and he's like, you know, we have a chief wine officer, a chief bourbon officer. We take the company to the Caribbean. He stops in the middle and goes, who does this? And he goes, I want to work for y'all. Mm-hmm. And I think that was it. And, you know, we were just getting started with Clemson University in their intern program or co-op program. Mm-hmm. So we were competing against Michelin, BMW, Bach, like all the big boys. And we struggled. Who's at Voco? And we had like 3 or 4, and it came to going on the trip. And somebody said, well, what do we do with the interns? And I'm like, we take them. Why would we not take them? Mm-hmm. So we take them. Well, think about it. They go back to Clemson, coming on a 4-day all-expense trip to the Caribbean, have the best time of their life. They tell everybody, we became the #1 requested co-op program at Clemson University. We could get any student we wanted. And as you're in an organization, people are like, well, we can't hire. We can't find good people. We were like,
right.
We're beating them down.
Right.
We didn't, you know.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, you're right. You're right. And we saw, I know we talked about your success with Clemson. We had the same type of thing with the Citadel, in that they were making a lot of money right out of school, right? So they would make high, decent salary, but high commission. And they would tell the people behind them, right? Hey, you can make this much money in your first, second year out of school. And so, you know, people thought I was a great recruiter. Hell, they were calling me, right? So I think you're right. And getting the young talent is priceless. I remember talking to you about how they just knew how to do stuff faster, right? I mean,
gosh, they get the software like better than any of us do. We just have to sort of teach them, you know, how to get a credit card, how to travel, how to, you know, get a rental car. Like, it's easy stuff.
Yeah.
But they were phenomenal. And, you know, I think back, John, that story is, if you think about the heyday of DataStream, right? You could come to DataStream, have fun, make money, and do something that mattered. Like, that's what people want.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at employees, they want to know their work matters.
Yeah.
They want to know what winning looks like.
Yeah.
And they want to know that they mattered. And DataStream was so good at it. You were so good at that the people at the Citadel just said, I want on that train, because you were the person that people were happy to see. And I think that's like, and that's why I'm kind of like, I'm so passionate about that word happy, is, you know, in sales, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're anybody in life, the question is, are people happy to see you? Are you running a business that people are happy to see? Or is it like the phone rings and your boss, you're like, right? I don't want to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And so I think that word is, we need to take that to heart and figure out our brand. And when we do, that's where the magic is. It's not hard. It's just being the person people are happy to see.
Yeah. Again, we can talk all day about happiness and being that person, but, you know, I think it starts by showing up and being kind of showing up happy. Like if I show up and I've got a grump on, you know, you'd be like, I don't know if I want to hang around John, but he needs to start out happy. And the second thing is to be interested in the other person. Like, if I'm always interested in you, you're going to be like, I can't wait to see John again. He's fun to talk to, right? He's, you know, so those are some basics, I believe, but you're right. That's all important in a leader. And I was just thinking, with your company with 140 people, if Marty was out in front of that sled and you're making all the calls and you're handling the tough customer service, you'd be pulling that sled so hard, and you wouldn't got near as far, even though you're the best person there. It's setting the rest of them loose. So y'all do it, and I'll help you.
It's the power. I always say it's the power of leverage, right? As individuals, if you really want to be successful, it's you. Like they always say, dentistry is one of the hardest professions because they only make money when their hands are in your mouth. And they can have cleaners and
flossers
and stuff like that. But if he's not there, they can't be open.
Right.
And the hardest thing is they have no leverage. We're in sales. We're in running businesses. If we can leverage ourselves, like that's where A, it's where the money is, but B, it's where the fun is. Like watching these people succeed, watching them win, like that just brought me joy.
Well, let me ask you, I don't want to get too far away from the book. It might be in there, I don't know.
Yeah.
But one of the things you did with this business is you went back to the data stream customers that bought good software, got it installed, and got some training, but they never really got the value out of it. Mm-hmm. And you went back in there and you said, describe to me, like, I think it was Wayne Farms, or there was one, the big chicken company, where you went in and figured out the real value that they could get if it was working properly, and then gave them what looked like a really big number to get there.
Yeah.
But compared to this number, it wasn't that big, and you made it happen. And I think this is a microcosm of what you did at Advoco to make it so successful. So tell that story.
Well, I think we're, again, as whether it's leadership or sales, right? We have to be always helping whoever we're dealing with and our customers to think a little differently. If I just keep showing up, like, how many seats do you need, or you need services or whatever, they get all that, and I can pick up the phone. Like, no value. They're not happy to see me.
Right.
And what we had figured out is if we truly invested time inside of our customers to learn their business, to understand what challenges they had, and we were always like challenging them to think new. And so we had one customer, right? And we used to kind of look at MRO parts, and we're like touring the plant. We're like stepping over parts. I'm taking pictures. And I look at the guy, and I like randomly, sales question was, well, how much do you spend in spare parts every year? And he goes, I don't know, 100 million? I was like, and then I have this thing called the rule of three. So I say, so over the next 3 years, you're going to spend $300 million in spare parts. And he went, yep. And I was like, if there was a way that I learned, to save you 10% on that, would you want to know more about it? The guy's like, yeah. Because we had a program that could help them, because they didn't know where their parts were. They didn't know what they had, so they just kept overbuying. So if I could save you 10%, that was $30 billion. So I'm like, I could save you $30 billion. The guy goes, I have no doubt. He goes, what's it going to cost me? And I was like, $7 million. I don't know. I just picked the number because it didn't matter. Like, if I could help them save money, and that's what we did, right? Because we found the need. And it's just like, we saw it every day, and customer after customer had this software, and they weren't happy because nobody was talking to them about what could they truly do. Nobody was finding those angles that if I invested time and money. And you mentioned Wayne Farms, and we had just such fun with them and such a great client that we would even go and serve food. We would go, and we got aprons made that said Wayne Farms, pride and maintenance, and we'd have hats, and we would go serve lunch to the maintenance guys. Like, it was just fun to get them out and to see them and be there. Yeah.
Well, it's a good lesson in leadership, but also just in the return on investment scenario, where most software companies, including ours, had already sold software, and they were going back in there and trying to find out if they needed more seats or maybe some training or, very surface level stuff.
Yep.
But then you went and thought like a business owner, how much are you spending on parts? How much we could save you 10%? That's $30 million. And then when they said, how much would it be? You didn't, that's where you really could have screwed it up, because you could have said, well, we're gonna look into that. We're gonna do a study. We're gonna get a proposal. And we're gonna have to do a count, right? Yeah. You just said $7 million, and you put some footnotes in there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And guys like, okay. I mean,
who wouldn't spend 7 to get 30? Like, was it easy return on investment?
Yeah, and I think you did a great job also of not thinking about money in your personal terms. You thought about money in terms of just numbers, like 37, that's a pretty good deal, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I'd be like, oh, 7. Oh God, what about 200,000? You know, I mean, people would.
Well, a typical deal, like in that case, would have been $200,000 to $400,000 if we didn't uncover that. And I think what was interesting was with that money, it was the potential that we could not only do that, but we could do so much more.
Yeah.
Like, how could we really help them transform their business into world class? And that's what they wanted, right? People are always like, how can I get there? And, you know, our job, and this is what I said, you know, from the book Donald Miller wrote, like, Story Brand, it is a marketing book, but it turned out, and I talk about this in my book, is what hit me is, as consultants, as salespeople, we're not the hero of the story. If you think in sales, when you walk in that you're the hero, I'm the hero to save you, they'll throw you out every time.
They're the hero.
They're the hero of the story. When you go in with your customers, they're the hero. Our job is the guide. And, you know, if you think about just a simple movie, right? It's Star Wars. Like every story is a hero has a problem. They seek a guide. A guide comes in with a plan. And that's what we are in sales, is our job as individuals is to help the hero win. Yodas. We're Yodas. We're Yoda helping Luke fight Darth Vader. Could Yoda have fought Darth Vader? Yes.
Easily.
Hey, you know, he could have chopped him up.
Yeah.
But that's our goal. And I think that's the thing I always laugh when I see salespeople and they consistently walk in thinking that they're like, I'm here to save you. And people are like, yeah, no.
I got a couple more questions. One is a remarkable story that, again, is in the book, but it's about how you were doing I guess right around COVID, you were doing a trade show or some kind of meeting or something, and you ended up not doing the show, and you had a bunch of food, and you decided to try to make that into a positive. So tell us how that worked and what the ending was.
Yeah. So one of the things, I have this belief in the power of moments. Like, we have opportunities in people's lives in transition and situations to create something magical, whatever that could be. And for us, one of the, you know, again, I'll go back. So the Christmas party turned out to be a moment, right? It turned out to be this magical moment that just helped our company grow. When COVID hit, it was right around the end of March in 2020. That's 2020, 2019, 2020. And we were getting ready to do a conference. We get 400 people to come in, and we're like, we can't do this. Like, we can't do this thing. And so as a leader, like, we're stuck. Like, what do we do? How do we lead our team? And I said, we're going to have to cancel it. We can't do this. But let's go online. We had been doing webinars. We had been doing stuff. So we kind of knew the online world. So we said, let's move it online. People had already paid their fees. They were comfortable with doing it. You know, graciously, I went to the hotel, the Spring Hill Suites. I mean, they were wonderful. They let us out of our contract. The Hugheses, their space, they said, let's just roll the contract over another year. I mean, just an incredible outpouring of people understanding the situation. And so we had $15,000 of people's money that was going to breakfast, lunch, and so forth. And I felt bad because the other one was Table 301, was Carl Sobocinski, and he had a restaurant that were being shut down. And so I wanted to meet Carl, and I said, how do we do something great with this money? And so we met outside of his office. And I remember saying, can I do 1,000 meals? I want to just feed some people. And Carl thought about it again. He goes, I really want to be part of this mission. He goes, I could put a meal together, a box lunch and so forth, for $3 a meal. And I did the math. I mean, it's 5,000 meals. And, you know, again, as a Christian, it's a very biblical number, like 5,000. And I was just taken back. And so we started this program. And again, I laughed because our first one was going to be Towers East on Main Street. There's a place there, and our church was next to it, and they don't let people get on their property, so we were going to line up on the side of the property and hand out 350 meals. And that night, Knox White came out and said, you know, with COVID, nobody can be outside. If you gather, we're going to arrest you. And my pastor calls, and she says, Marty, we can't do this. Like, I don't want to get arrested. And I was like, Susan, think about the prison ministry. Like, I don't do prison. So I was like, okay. So I call. I go, I don't know. We got canceled. We can't do it. He goes, I've already made all the meals. I was like, what do I do? And I knew my neighbor worked at Prisma in the emergency room. And I called her up and I said, hey, I have 350 meals. I would love to deliver to first responders. And she's like, yeah, that would be great. And so we went in and served meals to the nurses, to the doctors, to ambulance. And I got pictures and, even under mask, you could see it was just a gift that they mattered. And this went on and people started giving us more money. And I think we raised like $60,000. So that was another 20,000 meals. And then all of a sudden there was something called the CARES Act, which was a government program to help businesses do good in the community. And there wasn't a lot of programs going on. So we applied for that and we received over $1 million in money. And so at the end of the program was like $1.2 million and 400,000 meals. It was an incredible program. We met some incredible people and I think really touched the lives of all the people that are involved, from Table 301 to Voco to Lisa Anderson from Peacock, was so instrumental in helping us there. So
well, that's a great story. I think it also, talks about the power of the moment. And the moment was that when things were going bad and the thing was canceled and you had this money, didn't know what to do with it, and you said, what can I do really cool with it? Versus sit here and cry over spilt milk, right?
Yeah.
So that's the power of the moment. Most people think about the end of the story, which is we got $1 million and we 100,000 people. No. It's the beginning. That's the important part.
It is.
You started something, and then where you started from, who knows where it's going to go?
Who knows? And so,
well, let's talk about one more thing. So we've launched this wonderful book, and you sold your company, so you're free.
Yeah.
What are the services that you can provide companies, I guess, relative to the book? Are you speaking, and what are the kind of things are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so a couple things, and I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, ultimately, one of my goals, again, is I want to change leadership in the world, in America. I really believe we can do things differently. We can be great. We can become the leaders people are happy to see. And so one of the things that I've done is I've done some mentoring programs. So I'm on the board at Next Gen, helping entrepreneurship. I work with the ATVL group out of Spartanburg. What I really love to do is speak. I love to meet with sales teams and organizations and really kind of share the message of finding significance. And so if you go to my website, it's just martyosborn.com. You can get a hold of me if you'd like for me to speak, if you want to talk about the book. I'd love to do it. And we're also getting ready. Another big news flash. I can't sit still.
I know.
Is getting ready with a couple of friends to launch a new company called By Design Advisors, and helping companies with getting unstuck. What we found is a lot of companies don't know what's next. Mm-hmm. And they always ask that question John, what's next? You just asked me, Marty, what's next? Mm-hmm. And as organizations, they get stuck. They're not sure what's next. Do I sell my company? Do I grow my company? What do I need to do? And so we're getting ready to launch a new company called By Design Advisors to basically help companies understand how to get unstuck or to what's next. Yep. And so that's going to be a lot of fun as well.
Well, I would highly recommend any companies out there to consider Marty to come speak to their company, basically, or their leadership team or their sales team, but to come speak to them, maybe a keynote or a sales meeting or something like that. And then when you launch the new company, we'll have you back and we'll talk about the new company and what you're doing and the importance of using good sales consultants to help those companies.
Well, right? Nothing happens, John, till something gets sold. And I've always been a big believer in that. Yeah. And I'm a big believer in the noob school community and, leaders, right? Leaders are learners. Yeah. And the people that if they really said, what's the number one key to success? It's what you teach, what I teach, and how do we continue to do it? And
there it is.
There it is, the book.
Stocking stuffers, right?
Yes, man.
All right.
I appreciate it, John.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.
Thanks.
Awesome. Congratulations.